Welcome to Podcast Circle. I am the creator and host, Alex Hitt. On each episode of Podcast Circle, we bring together a group of entrepreneurs and business owners to have roundtable discussions about our experiences building and running businesses today. While I host and moderate the conversation, the views and opinions expressed by each guest are their own. I do not endorse any products, services, or advice shared on the podcast unless explicitly stated. With that said, let's jump into our introductions so you know who has joined us today. Barrett, would you please start us off?
Dr. Barrett Matthews, Media Boss Pro, MediaBossPro.com.
Evan Mestman, Pro Attitudes, ProAttitudes.com.
Roelf, Waldring, The Right Talent, The-Right-Talent, CA.
Darren, Finnigan, Harness Data Consulting, HarnessDataConsulting.com.
Burt, Levy, Revenue Mountain, RevenueMountain.com.
And the topic of discussion today is, how would you change the system of business if you could?
Well, the system of business, the way it's set up, is, in my opinion, it's just revenue generated, and I think a lot of times it's not relationship generated. And a lot of people want to start out with the money first. And I believe that in order to really change the way we do business, we have to, of course, get someone's information. That's okay to get information, then have an action that they take, and then go after money. So if we're going to do business, we have to make sure we get information. How are you going to get information? By building trust. Build trust and build a relationship so they want to give you their information. They see something, some value in you so that they can actually then give you information. That's still relationship building. At that point, then you can ask them to take some type of action. It could be something, hey, show up at my event. Just say hello to my people, engage with everyone. Just let them know that they're taking an action towards doing business with you. At that point, you've built a trust, you've gotten information, then you've gotten to take some action towards what you're doing, which shows that they have an interest. At that point, you can make them an offer that costs some money. It doesn't have to be an exorbitant amount. It could be one. But the thing is, you have to start out with building a relationship, and you can't go for the money first. I see it too many times, and I think it damages business relationships.
From a business perspective, what I find that needs improving, if we could change the way we hire and fire people, I don't really think that in business today, we understand the value of the front line. It's the people that are out there really doing the business, the salespeople or people on the front line. When I hear about these huge layoffs that happen, all for satisfying shareholders, and it's always about the quarter, it's not long-term, it's short-term. And when I learn about the companies that invest in their employees and go, you know what, rule of law here is that no one's ever going to get fired. You don't fire your kids. They come home with a D or an F. You go, oh, you're fired. You can't fire your kids. Well, when you hire somebody, they're part of your family. It's part of the culture. If you had that attitude, instead of firing them, really figure out what's going on. Figure out how do you develop their productivity, their engagement, so that they do make that company a better company. And I've read so many wonderful success stories about companies that really will take and actually take money away from the top leaders, the CEO, so that they can bring it back to the employees and figure out how to turn things around, especially if it's outside their control because of the economy. We need better leaders to do things like that.
Listen, everybody in the world engages in commerce. Everybody in the world shares a story called profit and loss. There are no profit and losses in nature. There's either success or not success, survive or not survive. Everybody calculates around the world that profit or loss on an annual basis. No wonder we have climate problems. No wonder we have ecology problems. No wonder we have social problems. No wonder we have war. We don't live annually. We live at best generationally and family-wise. We've got to change the story that drives business around the world. We have to stop saying, you're a great leader if you produce an annual profit, and start saying, you're a great leader if you produce a profit over the long run. You're a great leader if you run your business in such a way that no child is killed. You're a great leader if you run your business in such a way that you contribute to the long-term survival of the human race, not this year's profit and this year's bonus based on your earnings per share.
You know, something that I came across recently as sort of a survey said somewhere, I think it was 70 to 80% of people don't enjoy the work they do or find that it provides no value to anyone. which I think is quite shocking. Obviously, I don't have the survey in front of me, but I think for me, if I could make a change in the business world, it would be allowing people to focus on work they love. I think too often we see in companies, or at least what I'm seeing in my own experience, is that people are focused on time-consuming, repetitive tasks that really don't allow them to express themselves as people, to express themselves creatively, that allows them to focus on something that gives them passion and gives them reason to want to go into work. And I'm seeing a lot of people just really working for money, working for benefits, working for, the health insurance, those types of things, as opposed to really being able to just do something that they love. And I think it's very sad and it's very hard for people to break out of that cycle. And I just think if businesses could find a way to not only invest in their people, but invest in their people's well-being, their state of mind, their mental health, and really just give them something that drives them to improve in their own life, to not just grow in how are you going to grow in this company, but how are you going to grow in your life and grow into a position or to work that you really truly find passion and love in. So, that's something that I just think if I could change. I know for me, I've worked many jobs that just didn't do it for me and was really at the end of the day soul crushing. And I think it's sad that that's sort of the state of affairs for a lot of people. And that's why I enjoy connecting with entrepreneurs, because I think that's such a great way to break out of that cycle.
So my answer's in two parts. The first is I think technology has both helped business and ruined business from the standpoint of going on what Barrett said. Technology has taken away a lot of the key to businesses, which is interpersonal relationships. We're very dependent on email, texting, and go back to the basics of interpersonal relationships. Is where everything starts. But the biggest way to change business today is by changing leadership. I think we have managers, bosses, and supervisors, not leaders, mentors, and coaches. And that's what we need to transition more of leadership to. And I think when you can transition from management to leadership, you transition from me to we. And a great leader doesn't create followers. A great leader creates more leaders. And I think leaders need to understand that leadership is a privilege, not a rank. And getting back to even what Evan touched on, leadership is really the stewardship of the lives that are entrusted to you. And your kid comes home from school and gets a C on his report card. You don't put him up for adoption. Your family, you figure out how to make it work. It's the same thing that happens in business. You hired these people. All of a sudden, what's wrong with them? Many times you have the right people. Maybe they're just in the wrong jobs. But I think businesses and corporations, they hire and fire way too quick. And I think leadership and parenting are identical. I think you should treat your employees no different than you treat your children. And I think that you should be the type of leader you want your children to have. And so if somebody asks you, would you ever want your children to work for you? And you say no, you've got a problem. Because it should be no different treating your employees the way you treat your children. And I think that great leaders have the opportunity to help change the world by the way they send their employees home at night. And when you send your employees home at night feeling good and confident about what they do, making sure that they're appreciated, valued, and respected for the work they did that day, that helps to change the world because you go home and you're engaged with your family.
We're in this entrepreneur space where a lot of us are solopreneurs. We have our own business. And a lot of times, one person getting business means somebody else doesn't. And I wish we could all, in some ways, be a part of like one big network marketing company where all of us could benefit from giving each other business. And I think finding ways that we can collaborate as businesses that create mutual benefit, tangible mutual benefit that relate to like money or growing all of our business collectively by helping each other. And I think a lot of times business is seen as business's war, or we're crabs in a bucket when we should be more so birds of a feather. It's sink or swim when it should be a rising tide raises all ships. But that's so hard to actually do for solopreneurs or for entrepreneurs. And that's not always the case, but I think in some of the spaces that we run in, that's some of the problems that we encounter. And we constantly kind of pass the buck to the left in the small kind of circle that we run into, hoping that it gets around to everybody. And I've been trying to kind of break out of this kind of online networking space, get above the fray, to reach out to a new audience and to bring new people in. And so this even podcast is a form of that. How can we all come together as business owners and collaborate in a real tangible way that moves the needle forward or has an effect? And then something that I'm exploring and I'm looking into a lot more. Like I said, how can we collaborate as business owners that has a tangible, real mutual benefit to everybody involved? Because if it's just like goodwill and karma, it's not going to be a priority to people and they're just not going to do it consistently over time. But I think you guys touched on some really amazing things. So I want to open up the discussion a little bit more for more follow-ups, questions, or insights. Go ahead, Burt.
I think in part of what we talked about today, believe it or not, I think part of the problem is our academic institutions. They're part of the problem because the academic institutions teach us all the technical skills on how to get a job and not really human skills. They teach accounting and management and statistics and history and debate and speech, but we don't teach human skills. We teach how to talk, but we don't teach how to listen. Listening's a critical leadership skill and really one of the most powerful acts of caring, and especially empathetic listening. We don't provide education on human skills so people can live a life of meaning and purpose. Our educational system is built around money. They teach you the technical skills to get a job and make money, but they don't really teach you the human skills. And again, I think being an empathetic leader, an empathetic listener is one of the greatest qualities that a leader has, is to be able to listen. Most leaders talk. They think if they go down on the floor and talk to their people, they've done a good job, but they're talking, they're not listening. And the one other thing I'll add is you can walk into a bookstore and find sections on self-help, but there's no sections on how to help other people. And I think great leadership evolves into helping others.
So human beings are the only species on the planet that verbally contracts to work, to agree to do something together that creates a future which didn't exist before. None of other species do that. Yeah, they instinctively do things together, but they don't contract to work. So there's nothing inviolate about the contracts we could create. We can always create new contracts. And leadership is about facilitating that contracting process. So when we all get together and say, hey, the only thing that counts is how we compete, Alex's point, with other people, and therefore we should reward leaders for how effective they compete, there's no reason for that to stay in place. We could easily say, the only thing that counts is how well we collaborate with other people, and leadership should be rewarded for engendering that collaboration. We have the ability to change. We just don't seem to be willing to do it.
All these points, they resonate with me because as a leader, I know what's really missing out there. I had a CEO stand on stage once, bringing a company into the global arena, and he shared this approach that always has left its mark on me. He said, we need delighted customers, motivated employees, and satisfied shareholders, but not one at the expense of another. I mean, this was 50, 20 years ago. It's still in my head. It was an aha moment for me sitting there. I had just started in corporate America and listening to a CEO talk how he was taking charge of this company, but really asking us, how can we do this? And I think that's really what it is. We all have to believe that we can. And we all have to be part of this process, that it's not one over the other over the other. And when we see that it's not balanced, we need to call it out. And Alex, you talked about how can we collaborate? We need to hold everybody else accountable. I don't believe that there's any competition out there. Our competition is with ourselves. How can we be 1% better than yesterday and not worry about there's plenty of business to go around, and work together to raise the tide. All the ships will rise. All those boats are going to rise with the tide.
Well, I think there needs to be a shift. There have been shifts throughout history. I mean, there was a time when people raised up their kids to teach them to run their business, to run the family business, to run the farm, wherever it was. There was no job. But then around the whole world, as the Industrial Revolution took place, all of a sudden everyone has jobs. People are worried about getting fired. People are worried about if they're getting paid enough, so forth and so on. And we stopped teaching how to do things for ourselves, how to run our own business. Now I see a slight change where colleges are teaching entrepreneurship, but it needs to be taught in family. And that's something that I think that is missing. I know Burt talked about parenting. I think that's one of the things we need to be teaching entrepreneurship and teaching us to be self-sufficient, because God knows we can't rely on the job market to be there for us as we had in the past. So that there needs to be a shift, I believe.
The one thing I'll say regarding, I know we all touched on layoffs. Layoffs really didn't start. It was something that just did not start until the 80s. You never saw layoffs. And the best companies now, the most successful ones, when the situation of layoffs come, they don't do them. But what do? They do furloughs. They make everybody in the company take X amount of weeks, okay? Whether you're the janitor or the CEO. Everybody's got to take 3-4 weeks unpaid. And the concept is better we all suffer a little than a few people suffering a lot. And then what happens in this concept is you see people maybe I'm a more senior person and Bob's a new father and he can't afford to take 3-4 weeks unpaid. So I'll tell him, you know what, I'll trade. I'll take another week. You take 2 weeks. And then what happens is the employees start taking care of each other. And then when that happens and the employees know that their companies basically have taken care of them, they are prepared and set to pivot and adjust to innovative, to create, and to move forward as a company instead of sitting there going, God, please don't get me next. When you know that your company takes care of you, you take care of your company and you take care of the clients of the company and the revenue follows.
That's a wrap for this episode of Podcast Circle. Thank you to all of our guests for sharing their insights today. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening. Also, head over to my website, alexhitt.com, to find additional resources, to attend upcoming online events, and to apply to be the next guest on Podcast Circle.